Residents' rights. Placing a loved one in a nursing home is among the most difficult decisions a family can make. Often there's a deep sense of loss and feelings of guilt as they struggle with the question of whether or not the right choice was made. For a newly admitted resident, frail health and a loss of independence can lead to depression and a sense of isolation. This elderly resident suffers from clinical depression. Until recently, he had been cared for by his daughter. As his depression worsened, he grew more withdrawn and incapable of taking care of his basic daily needs.
One day he stopped eating. I couldn't do anything to coax him to eat. So I finally called the doctor and I said, what do we do now, you know? We just didn't feel we could handle that anymore. And so the doctor had prepared us ahead of time. There comes a point when they need 24-hour care and you can't give it to him.
When a nursing home admits a resident, the facility and its staff become responsible for the resident's safety and well-being. Along with handling the concerns of family members, the facility is required by law to protect a resident's rights and provide quality care. The purpose of this program is to provide nurse aides with a basic understanding of residents' rights. Our program is divided into 3 parts. Part 1 is an introduction to basic residents' rights. Part 2 covers abuse and neglect, misappropriation of property, and unnecessary use of restraints. Part 3 is a summary of the right to quality care. Being treated with dignity and respect is a basic right of all residents. Although many residents suffer from physical and mental conditions that severely limit their ability to take care of themselves, they are still entitled to exercise their rights as facility residents and as U.S. citizens. If a resident is deemed incompetent under state law, then a legal representative will exercise the resident's rights on his or her behalf. Residents have the right to be informed of the services available in the facility and of the charges related to those services. Upon admission, the facility must inform residents of both their rights and their responsibilities as a resident. Part 1. Basic Resident Rights. The following section is a summary of basic residents' rights derived from federal regulations. You should be familiar with these rights as they relate to your duties. The right to privacy, personal possessions, protection of personal funds, access and visitation, free choice, grievances, and notification of changes. The right to privacy. Treating a resident with dignity and respect also means recognizing their right to privacy. Honoring a resident's right to privacy is especially important during treatment and care of the resident's personal needs. For example, privacy should be maintained during toileting, bathing, and other activities of personal hygiene. It is important to remember that residents have a right to privacy in their rooms. You should always knock before entering unless it is an emergency. Residents also have a right to privacy during phone conversations, visits, and meetings with family members or with resident groups. Additionally, residents have a right to privacy in written communications, including the right to send and promptly receive mail that has not been opened. Personal possessions. Every resident has the right to keep and use his or her personal possessions as space permits. This includes items such as clothing and some furnishings. Residents have a right to retain their personal possessions unless they interfere with the rights of other residents or pose a health or safety hazard. Protection of personal funds. Residents have the right to manage their own financial affairs. If a resident wants a facility to manage his or her funds, then the resident must give the facility written authorization to do so. In this case, the facility must follow state and federal record-keeping requirements. Access and visitation. Residents have the right to receive visitors of their choice. They also have the right to refuse visits and may end a visit at any time they choose. The facility must provide residents with immediate access to family members and friends, personal physician, representatives of the state, and the state long-term care ombudsman who may serve as an advocate on their behalf. During visiting hours, the facility must also provide a resident with reasonable access to community organizations or legal advisors. Free choice. Residents have the right to choose a personal attending physician. They also must be given the opportunity to participate in the planning of their care and treatment. Residents have the right to be informed in advance about what type of care and treatment they will receive.
Treatment or a plan of care that we change or would like to initiate with a resident, we discuss that with the resident and talk to them about it, involve them as much as possible.
If a resident requests information concerning his or her health status, then the attending physician must provide it. It is important to remember that families also have the right to know the health status of their loved one.
With regard to the health status or care of a resident, the nurse aide could discuss with the resident their plan of care and their daily activities as the nurse aide is involved in the care of the patient. If the patient were to request information regarding a diagnosis or the status of a particular illness such as heart disease or diabetes, then it would be appropriate for the nurse aide to forward that request on to the attending physician or nurse supervisor for further clarification.
Another aspect of a resident's right to free choice is their right to self-determination and participation. This means that a resident has the right to make their own schedule and choose the activities they would like to participate in, including social, religious, or community activities.
It's important for people to have choices, and we try to give them a certain amount of control back. They know we're going to give them a bath every day, but still it's important to knock on that door to say, would you like your bath now? It's time for your bath. Would you like it now? Would you like me to come back?
Grievances. A resident has the right to voice grievances without being discriminated against or punished. Grievances can include complaints about treatment or the behavior of other residents. The facility has an obligation to resolve these problems as quickly as possible. Notification of changes. Whenever an event occurs that significantly affects a resident's safety or well-being, the facility should immediately inform both the resident and the people who are involved with his or her care. These people include family members, attending physician, or legal state representative. Typically, the events that should be reported to these interested parties are an accident resulting in injury, a significant change in the resident's physical or mental condition, or a change in treatment. In addition to these health-related events, a resident and interested parties have the right to be quickly notified of room changes, changes in roommate assignment, and the decision to transfer or discharge the resident. Part 2. Abuse and neglect, misappropriation of property, and unnecessary restraints. Frail health and mental impairments can make a nursing home resident virtually powerless against abusive behavior. The abuse or neglect of a resident is a serious offense. It can result in immediate dismissal, litigation, government penalties and fines, or criminal prosecution. Every nursing home resident has a right to be free of abuse and neglect, free of misappropriation of property, and free of unnecessary restraints. The following sections will provide you with descriptions of these terms. Abuse and neglect. Federal regulations define abuse as the willful infliction of injury, unreasonable confinement, intimidation, or punishment with resulting physical harm or mental anguish. This means that residents have the right to be free from verbal, sexual, physical, and mental abuse, corporal punishment, and involuntary seclusion. Evidence that a resident may have been physically or emotionally abused include cuts, scratches, bruises, or burns, weight loss, and sudden changes in behavior, such as being emotionally upset, agitated, or withdrawn. Neglect is another form of mistreatment. Federal regulations define neglect as failure to provide goods and services necessary to avoid physical harm, mental anguish, or mental illness. Residents who suffer from neglect are often left unattended for long periods of time. Care for their physical and mental health needs are ignored or deliberately withheld. Indications of neglect include dehydration, malnutrition, pressure ulcers, poor personal hygiene, and unsanitary or unclean living conditions. Misappropriation of property. Because many residents are limited both physically and mentally, they are vulnerable to having their personal property stolen or used without their permission. This is essentially what misappropriation of property means. Federal regulations define misappropriation of property as the deliberate misplacement, exploitation, or wrongful, temporary or permanent, use of a resident's belongings or money without the resident's consent. Unnecessary use of restraints. A resident has the right not to be physically or chemically restrained. This includes restraints in the form of psychotropic medication. The use of restraints is appropriate only when it is authorized by a physician or in an emergency situation. An example of an emergency would be the restraint of an individual who is in the process of causing harm or injury to himself or to another person.
A physical restraint is something that impedes the patient's free access to their environment or to their own person. Examples of that might be a bed rail that prevents a patient from getting out of bed, or even a laptop tray used for feeding, but if that device is not able to be removed easily by the patient, it may be considered a restraint.
Freedom from abuse and neglect, freedom from misappropriation of property, and freedom from unnecessary restraints. These are essential rights of all residents. To help enforce these rights, federal regulations require that facilities do the following. First, maintain written policies and procedures prohibiting these types of mistreatment. Second, to deny employment to individuals who have been found by a court of law to have abused, neglected, or mistreated a resident. Third, to report individuals who have engaged in mistreatment of residents. Knowledge of these individuals and their violations must be reported to licensing authorities or the state nurse aid registry. Part 3. The right to quality care. Receiving quality care and being treated with dignity and respect is every resident's fundamental right. It is a right that is enforced by the state and federal government. When quality care is not provided, a facility and its employees can be held liable for neglect or even abuse. A facility can also be given costly fines and penalties if state inspectors uncover deficiencies in the care provided to residents. Federal regulations define quality care as the care and services needed to help residents reach or maintain their highest level of well-being possible. This includes physical, mental, and psychosocial. A key to quality care is a staff that has the resources and ability to meet individual residents' needs consistently. Nurse aides who are responsive and sensitive to the needs of residents can make the difference between quality care and care that is substandard.
First thing, you have to have patience, because you might go in with one patient and they're, talking just like me and you. The next one you might go in, they might be throwing food at you or hollering at the top of their lungs. And then the next one you go in, they could be dying, so you have to have compassion, for that person and their family.
I got this thing about family, and I tell my CNAs, treat those patients, if it was your mother or your sister or your husband, whoever in that bed, treat them, talk to them the way that you would want someone to talk to you or your family member. Treat them the same way.
Pay attention to your residents. Know your residents. Talk to your residents.
According to federal regulations, one of the primary duties of a nurse aide is to assist residents in activities of daily living. The amount of assistance residents need is determined by their physical and mental condition. However, in cases where it is possible, residents should receive the necessary help to improve their ability to perform these activities independently.
We truly try to allow them to do those personal care needs on their own as much as possible.
A facility that is providing quality care is one where residents are safe, secure, and well attended. In this environment, residents are encouraged to speak with staff and feel comfortable asking for help when needed. Quality care includes a facility with a clean, home-like environment, residents who appear well kept, nutritional meals, resident activities, and the absence of odors from incontinent waste or poor hygiene. It is important to note that the absence of urine or feces odors are an indication of two important aspects of quality care. First, residents are being properly toileted. Secondly, residents with more severe forms of incontinence are being attended to promptly and are not allowed to linger in soiled briefs or bed sheets.
think that my staff is very oriented to them becoming a part of their family almost. I mean, the nurses will actually say, well, that's my patient, you know, I'll take care of that. And those kinds of, the CNAs are particularly cautious about anybody else taking care of their patient while they're on vacation or when they're out for a day or two. They're very oriented to that patient being their patient.
Under the government's current initiative to ensure quality care, inspectors have intensified their focus on two areas: nutrition and pressure sores. The presence of malnutrition and pressure sores are considered indicators of substandard care. Factors that can contribute to malnutrition include a diet lacking in nutrition, oral or dental problems that make eating difficult, or not preparing food so that it is easier to eat and swallow. According to federal regulations, a facility must ensure that residents who are admitted without pressure sores do not develop them in the course of their stay. This often requires the use of a protocol to prevent skin breakdown. It includes skin care, turning schedules, pressure reduction surfaces, proper nutrition, and activities to improve a resident's mobility. For residents who have pressure sores, federal regulations require that they receive the proper care to promote healing and prevent new sores from developing. Program Summary. The following is a review of some of the key points you need to know for your post-test. Part 1. Basic residence rights. A resident has the right to privacy in their room during care or treatment or during communication with visitors. The right to keep and use personal possessions as space permits. The right to manage their own personal affairs. The right to choose their own personal physician and to participate in the planning of their care and treatment. The right to voice grievances without being punished or discriminated against. The right to be notified of changes such as room changes, roommate assignments, or transferring or discharging. And the right to receive visitors of their choice. The facility must also allow immediate access to family members and friends, personal physician, and representatives of the state. Part 2. Abuse and neglect, misappropriation of property, and misuse of restraints. Residents have the right to be free of neglect and abuse such as sexual, physical, and mental abuse or corporal punishment and involuntary seclusion. A resident has the right not to have their property misappropriated. This means that stealing or using a resident's property or money without permission is against the law. Residents have the right to be free of physical or chemical restraints. Restraints are appropriate only when authorized by a physician or during an emergency involving harm or injury to the resident himself or to others. Part 3. The right to quality care. Quality care is defined as the care and services needed to help residents reach or maintain their highest level of well-being possible. This includes mental, physical, and psychosocial. Pressure ulcers and malnutrition are key indicators of substandard care and place a facility at risk for fines, penalties, or litigation. As a nurse aide, you play an essential role in providing comfort and care to the elderly, the disabled, and the dying. Your service is one that is needed and worthy of respect.
You're here for the help. And if you could do something, you'd do it. And if in order to get something done, you just have to have a little help. And I think that the girls do that. They understand that if you would be able to get up and do things, you'd do it. And if you need a little help, just a little love and understanding.
You got to make them feel as though this is home, somebody here loves them, and somebody's going to always be here for them.
I treat every person just as if they're my mom or my dad.
Well, I expect to be treated kind. That's the best thing you can get, is kindness.